Hey folks, Steve here with another Red Strike video for you today. This is going to be looking at exercise scenario 3, red flag. I'm sticking this at the front of the video because you'll see it just here in the next clip is I guess, diving into the scenario. I had originally intended this to be in the last video, but as you could probably tell by the timestamp, this scenario alone takes a lot of time to explain with all the mechanics associated with the air war. So enjoy the video, guys. Okay, here we're showing a slightly modified version of the red flag scenario. I've chosen to go ahead and flip the exercise map 1 over to exercise map 2. This isn't actually one of the variants for red flag, but I just figured since I didn't do it for exercise 1, I'd at least flip it over and show that you can put a modifier on some of these scenarios that use the map. Everything is the same in terms of where the air bases are, Alpha, Bravo, Yankee, and Zulu, but you can see there's a lot more terrain. So it's not just this sort of clear green terrain. There's now woodlands, there's some urban terrain there in the center, separated by some river hex sides. So you can certainly mix things up a little bit because terrain obviously has an effect on ground combat, and it can sometimes affect other things like strikes and air. And so I don't know that it will truly make a difference in this red flag air based scenario, but we do have an air defense network. That's what these units are here. The Soviet one is in a woodland hex, so that might actually matter. And we'll play it that way. We'll self modify the scenario a little bit, even though the vast majority of what we're going to be looking at in red flag is air based. So I do have the setup chart hidden underneath both the map and the turn track stuff so that we can see just this scenario's setup information. There's these air defense networks, placing them as appropriate, and then we've got what looks like it's really 12 air units per side, and they are to be based in the Alpha and Bravo bases for NATO and uh, Yankee Zulu for the Warsaw Pact. Now, there's gonna have to be some explanation here about like what not only the air missions and all these things that we could be doing, but also just the fact that the air defense networks actually have a pretty strong impact, and basically like where they are located means the entire map, more or less for both sides, are going to be in their blanketed air defense network zones sectors, um, and well, for the most part, the respective side of the maps. Just to look at this and what this means is, if we just look at the NATO one, which we will find is has different values than the Warsaw Pact. there's a range for detection here, which is 6, and then there's an anti-air of 5, which is pretty good. And this is again available here. It's out on the map. It's going to be providing detection and defense capabilities in its sector, in its area, in its range. In general, right? This would be helpful even for having ground units involved here because it could help detect enemy air units as they go to strike our ground units. It is technically a sort of like ground unit installation, so to speak, here. So it is something that we can actually target to be struck and damaged. And so when we're counting up victory for this scenario, it it is a valid target. So what are the point factors for this scenario, you might ask? Well, um, it is the winner, victory conditions, the side achieving the most hits on the enemy's air defense network, so what we just said, air bases, so we can strike air bases, sure enough, and air units, or air units for that matter. So really, um, we've got options. We've got a target rich environment, perhaps. So if you're just looking at doing the most hits, you can imagine you're going to hope to get hits on actually targeting these locations. You would also like to be able to do hits if there is air-to-air combat. So all things told, this scenario, in terms of like, is it a competitive scenario? I think it's really just the way the dice are going to give you hits, and you can adjudicate how well you did based on how well you rolled. But certainly, we're going to want to create the circumstances where we're going to generate the most number of hits. So that's the puzzle as a learning scenario that we're trying to unpack here. So that's kind of where things stand. Now, in terms of just the boundaries of the scenario, Warsaw Pact player, I believe, is going to have initiative on game turn one. NATO will get it on game turn two. We will begin the scenario in the administrative phase, where we're going to be determining the mode for our units, or assign our units to particular uh, 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 modes. So in ground combat, there was frontline and reserve. In air unit land, that's a terrible way to say it. As it with regards to air units, they can be in interception or offensive, and you can kind of think of this the same way. So offensive is like frontline. Those are the units that you're going to use to go do stuff with, and interception are those units, kind of like reserve, that are intended to be more defensive in nature and respond to enemy offensive uh, strikes and sorties. And so you need to make a decision, just like in ground combat, at the beginning of a turn, how you want to split up your forces. And we actually, for this scenario, have a decent number of forces, and we have multiple air bases to put them on. So what's nice is each side gets 12 units. Each of the air bases here has a capacity, that's the CPY designator here, of 6. So you can actually have more than 6 air units at one of these air bases, but it can only send units on missions up to 6. So we don't, unless for some weird reason, well, actually, I could see a reason to do it. Unless we were going to overstock one of these air bases, basically, if we put 6 in one and 6 in the other, all 6 units will be able to do something. So I think that's going to be the preferable thing here. The reason why you maybe wouldn't do that is, and I'm not sure, maybe it matters more in a real game context. If one air base is really exposed, you might not want to base units there, because when an air base take hits, you will have to put hits on the planes that are based there potentially as well. So um, that's where those situations where we can generate more hits, right? Let's hit the air base, and if there are planes still there, not elsewhere doing stuff, we're not only going to do steps to the air base, we'll do steps to the units. So there's definitely an incentive here, I think, for both sides to want to do strikes against, bombardments against the airbase, um, and see what can be done, and how set up your composition of forces might really matter here, because if you say put a bunch of units in this airbase on, let's say, interception, it might be less desirable to go strike that airbase, because they're going to have more interception capability, to stop you, or better anti-air ratings on their fighters to defeat you up here. Maybe you're better off striking down here. It's those kind of decisions we're trying to break out here. Now, the next thing that really matters here then is like, well, how do you know what plane does what, and what plane is capable of doing whatever? It's a little unfair to some degree, because the NATO air units tend to be just a bit better, I think, than the Warsaw Pact units in many respects. So here's an example. This is what F-16A. On the front side of the counter, we get the usual stuff. This is, boy, I can't remember now if that's Polish or not. I guess it wouldn't be Polish if it was NATO. I can't remember. Anyway, so you have some units here. F-16A. We've got some range. Where their movement factors. We have these additional icons on the front side of the counter that indicates a couple of things. One, it's got some refueling capability, not going to really be relevant for this scenario. We also have the M which denotes that this is a multi-role plane, meaning it has some advantages that make it flexible. So we can very easily say this unit is on a uh, cap duty, doing combat air patrol, or it could be intercepting, or it could be doing air superiority, but also go and be the bomber if we want it to. So depending on where we want to lean into, this unit has some flexible capability to do it. And on the back side of the counter, we actually see kind of how that works. So here, this F-16 doesn't have cruise missile equipment packages, but it's got a bombard of 4. That's okay. They have an anti-air of 6, so that's pretty reasonable. And it's got its ECM, which are the countermeasures against things like cruise missile packages and beyond visual range weapons, stuff like that. And its hit capacity is 2, which is that last number there. So this is a way to get a sense of like what is this unit good at. It's got pretty good bombard at 4. That's very reasonable, and it's got a AA of 6. So this is truly a good multi-role fighter. What this unit can do when it goes on a mission is it can go out and if it's going to be the bombarding unit, if it gets detected and it's going to be intercepted, it can choose to drop its payload and fight at full air-to-air capacity. So, you caught me, and I'm not going to drop my bomb, but I'm going to protect myself and fight more, agilely in air-to-air combat. Or I can say, well, I'm going to try to get through this, and I'll fight at half of my anti-air capability, but maybe still be able to drop my bomb. And then after dropping my bomb, uh, or missile, what have you, and I'm heading back to base, if I'm intercepted or have to fight air to air, I'll fight at full air capacity at 6. So an interesting little decision tree graphic that accompanies this explanation in the rulebook. So pretty cool, multi-role. That's great. But that's not the only sort of units that we have here. So we also have an A10, and there's an icon here for precision bombing, meaning we can pick our targets that take hits. And I'm sure folks are familiar with the A10. You can see the big difference here is its bombardment is a 7. That's much stronger, right? This is a dedicated strike plane, right? Its air to air is really not that great. So if you're going to send this guy out to bombard, you're going to want to give him an escort. An escort that includes a unit with higher AA anti-air, so you can fight well. So maybe we'd send the A10 as NATO along with that F-16, perhaps, and that would be a reasonable um, mission, is to send those guys together. Now there are other planes on here, so if I want to grab, let's see, what would be a really good example of one? Here we go. This is a good one. Actually, no. Let's go with the F-18, FA-18s. If you really like, this is part of the like. This game is very detailed. If you're really interested in the air naval stuff, like this is, they're talking about individual models that have individual strike packages, um, all this kind of stuff. So here we see we've got FA-18A, multi-role, refueling capability, 36, and then you've got this 3 in a blue circle, and this is an ability to perform anti-air strikes against an enemy 3 hexes away. Granted, 3 hexes away, you actually aren't going to be rolling very well, but every hex you get closer, you can fire. What is it? It's a AIM AIM 7M package, and there is a row on the table of the missile tables or the weapon tables that tell you kind of what you need to roll to hit, and it gets better the closer you are. And you can see there's a bombardment of 5 and a 6. This is an all-rounder decent plane. But what's really cool with that beyond visual range weaponry here is if they were, say, intercepting a Warsaw Pact unit, And the whole mechanism is, they start to intercept and then they start to move hex by hex while their opponent continues to move hex by hex, and eventually you actually are going to be close enough to strike at the enemy. Well, many of the Warsaw Pact planes don't have equivalent beyond visual range weaponry like these guys here, as an example, these Su-25, Su-24 units. It means that NATO plane could actually fire at them with those beyond visual range weapons, give them some hits, force them to abort back to base, without being directly engaged. So this is a sort of ranged advantage depending on the equipment packages of your plane. So like, truly, in Red Strike, probably more than other games, and it's in the same kind of thematic arena, you're really having to look at your equipment. What weapons do you have? What weapon systems are you relying on, and how are they going to contest your enemy? And there's obviously some units that are very particular and good at certain things. So here's what we might describe as much more of a fighter plane, the Tornado here, right? Six air to air, but no bombardment factors and so on. So every unit here has its own individual capabilities on the back of the counters that uh, you have to kind of figure out, like, what are these guys going to do? We're going to go on strike missions. We're going to need escorts. We're going to need some of our fighters to remain an intercept so that they can go fight the bombers and escorts of the enemy. And both sides are probably going to be trying to do that. And so, 12 planes, you got to divvy them up. Generally speaking, the NATO forces, their planes have three sorties. So they can operate. There's an inherent advantage to NATO in the game because they have the three sorties, meaning every action stage, their planes could potentially go do stuff if they want to. And they have the hits and they didn't, overspend themselves. Where Warsaw Pact only tends to only get two sorties, but if there's three action stages, you can imagine here for a second the Warsaw Pact player is going to have to be careful what they choose to do because their planes may run out of sorties. If they're out of sorties, they're not going to do much, which could leave them susceptible to being heavily damaged in sort of the last action stage when any remnant NATO planes can go and beat them up. So, boy, that's a lot. There's a lot to explain there, folks. There are different mission types, and we'll talk about some of them in brief here. But that's the baseline, right? You got air defense networks. That's going to provide detection. You really want to detect your enemy's planes. If your planes can get into their area of operation undetected, that provides bonuses. If you have interceptors that are not detected, they may get to fire on the enemy's sortie before their escort can fire back, and that can be really powerful. So we're now starting to get into what I consider probably the more complicated part of Red Strike's rules, which is the air naval stuff, because yeah, ground unit stuff is more complicated than maybe your typical hex and counter war game. But the air and naval stuff, brings on all these additional layers and steps, and there's a little bit more. I'm not going to say fiddliness, but there's definitely a more interactive and involved moving counters around stuff that has to happen when you're doing the air, and air stuff like this can be happening throughout the movement segments and stuff like that. So this makes Red Strike way more interactive than maybe say a game like OCS or something where you're going to have these really long periods of time waiting for your opponent to finish their move. There's always going to be a chance that there's air stuff. You got to intercept, you got to move counters back and forth, and that's going to really slow down the gameplay in a bigger campaign kind of situation. So, um, with that said, let me try to uh, I think off camera, I'm going to take the air units from the setup sheet, and I'm going to try to arrange them in their air bases in a way that is somewhat logical. And I think I'm going to be staring at the backs of these counters to figure out what I want to do there and what we can achieve. Okay, so I have allotted my planes to the different air bases. I did an even split and between the air bases, and trying to make sure that each air base has some well, plenty of units to go strike with, because that is how we're determining victory. We are going to leave some stuff behind for interceptions and in cap, which we'll talk about in a second. Um, but really, it's a straightforward thing, and both sides have kind of allotted a similar number of planes to this effect. So it should be reasonably fair from that perspective. I'm not doing too crazy stuff here. Um, because both sides want to win, right? Yeah. Um, One other thing to keep in mind, so we have the capacity of air bases. There is also an inherent anti-air value that's used to defend. Air bases can defend themselves, and it's listed here. So 3 for NATO and 3 here for Warsaw Pact. It's all the same right now. I'm not sure if there's any air bases out there that are different than this, but um, we have that here. Now you will notice a difference here where we have the NATO forces on the 3 boxes that are on these charts. This means that these units have 3 sorties left, so they can be used in each action stage. Warsaw Pact units I think there are some exceptions to this, but they have 2 sorties each. And so we are placing them like this on the 2, meaning, unless this is actually a penalty, or we'll say a disadvantage the Warsaw Pact has to deal with, if they don't leave any units, unused, there could be a whole action stage where the NATO forces can go hardcore hitting up the Warsaw Pact. And that's kind of how, honestly, that's sort of the way that the NATO's set up right now, because they've got some units that can go do interceptions and do various things. Um, but they've got plenty of capability to go and operate, hoping for an action stage, that third one perhaps, right? When usually the non-initiative player is acting, where they can maybe go full power, right? If the Warsaw Pact player does not marshal their air force carefully to leave some units that didn't use all of their sorties. So there's a weird little sortie management aspect of this as we get going. Now, before we get fully underway, I do want to talk really briefly about those mission types. So I'm going to describe the basic ones. There are some mission types that units could be sent on that don't matter for this scenario, like close combat air support, close air support, CAS, that is flown during combat segments. There are no land units to have land combat, so there's no point in flying CAS uh, in this scenario. So ordinarily, yeah, that would be something we would be thinking about. We'd be probably picking some units off out of our force pool to dedicate to that, so that we are more effective in our ground combats. Here it doesn't matter. There's also strikes that you would be aiming at naval units, anti-ship, but there's no naval units here, so we're not going to do that either. We also don't have any units on the board that are AWACS or early warning detection system type units, besides our air detection, air defense networks. So there is a special mission type for like AWAC units that are not going to apply. So I'm going to talk about some standard missions that you're probably going to use most frequently, especially in land combat scenarios, or not land combat scenarios, but I should say general scenarios where air is going to be doing stuff. One is CAP. So that Combat Air Patrol, consider this a proactive defense. And what you do is you would be selecting, and I am actually set up to do this. I would like to pick a unit that I want to have for sure running benefit for cap, and I can
pick a unit out of my interception oriented units and say, I'm going to fly them cap. I'm going to select a place right above my air defense network, is where I'm picking. And I could set this unit. This happens to be MiG 29s. So sticking that guy here, he's got a nice air to air factor. So we're going to say that's proactive defense. We pay a lot more supply to go on cap, but it enables us to say we are going to take a unit, and it is a single unit, we're going to put them into that cap operation, meaning they are spending a lot of time just patrolling our own skies and allows us to basically intercept without intercepting, so to speak. That's probably a bad way to put it, but it's proactive defense. We're not reacting to an enemy move. We are basically projecting a unit whose job it is to patrol our territory, and they will benefit from being in cap this way. Now, I'm probably going to do something similar for NATO too, by the way, and I'm kind of not sure. Yeah, I think I was going to pick this guy. So we're going to put one of our tornadoes on cap in NATO territory. So each side selectively saying we are going to put some proactive defense up. That is great. Now, how do you contest uh, cap? Well, one of the missions that you can leverage is an air superiority mission, and that's basically sending a fighter, well, a unit with good anti-air, on the mission to head out and basically you I find doing some research online that air superiority is best used if you want to try to knock cap down, because you're not doing any other mission. You're not escorting other units with air superiority. You're not going on a strike. You're really just saying, I'm throwing up my fighters to clear the skies. You're going to use it to bring down enemy cap. So that's an option, right? We could take one of our units that's good at air to air out of our offensive allotment of units, and we could send them on an air superiority mission both ways to try to clear these proactive defense units. Now, there's obviously actual air to air interception. This is different from cap. It will mean that if we send some of our offensive units off to try to strike the air bases or strike the air defense network, units at the air bases can potentially try to intercept if we can detect the enemy flying in. If we detect them, we can say, hey, we're going to fly an interception. They leave the air base. They try to find, or they try to chase uh, the units that are coming in, and we fight air to air interception, or we do air to air interception, and there could be fighting that way. So, again, interception is a response. You're triggering that from the enemy's movement, and that's distinct from cap. So, we would be just responding to the enemy at that point. Escort missions, that's telling your air to aircraft to partner up with the strike craft and basically protect them. I think that's pretty straightforward. You would elect escorts whenever you're putting together your strike mission, and they are labeled differently. They get a anti-air mission counter, uh, undetected on the backside, but indicating this is the escort with an anti-air mission counter. Then you have the various types of strikes. Now, there's more than one type, so I'm just kind of summarizing. You could do a ship strike, an anti ship sort of strike. You could do a surface strike, which is what we'll use to attack the installations here, as well as ground units. And then you can do interdiction, which is not really relevant for this scenario, but that's striking a location and creating a field of increased movement costs. So that's something else you can do. We mentioned the CAS, close air, combat air support. Um, and then there's air naval interception, which we're not going to be doing in this scenario, but that's where you can actually send your ships, not your ships, your planes, on an interception mission in response to enemy naval movement. So there's a lot of capabilities here that even this scenario we're not going to really get to see. The main ones that matter for this scenario are going to be our cap, which I think both sides are going to elect to put up some cap, and then they're both really going to be flying different strike missions with escorts, and then having those escorts and strike missions contested by interception or the cap if we can leverage the cap to do that on our behalf. And that's kind of the table stakes for the scenario. But I'm electing each side to have some cap, um, both with decent air-to-air ratings, with the hope that both sides thinking the same thing. We want to be have some defense, and we want to go for the gold here with a lot of offensive capability. Each side still has some units behind in the interception boxes, with the expectation they're going to be running the interception missions, and the rest of these big, taller stacks of units are bombers with their escorts, basically. So that's sort of a pre-step. This is something we're still doing during the unit assignment phase. We've selected offense versus interception, and we've also elected our cap.
Okay, so let's take a look at the supply costs as we get started, because really the supply costs are really important, like they are for ground combat. But um, obviously, especially for air units, you want to fly a lot of planes. You can do that, but you're going to burn up a lot of supply. And in this scenario, each side is allotted 24 supply points, which might seem like a lot or a fair amount for the number of units on the board, maybe one per unit or two per unit overall. The reality is you burn up a lot of supply doing a lot of these activities. And in fact, it can be incredibly expensive. Case in point, for our cap that we have flown as both sides, and maybe this is going to just help illustrate the differences between the two sides, and maybe for one of our sides here in the scenario, we should not have done cap because it's going to hurt our supply elsewhere. Um, we're going to spend supply when we go on missions, right? So we would normally spend supply to determine our ground combat's formation. In the air realm, it's just, hey, if you're going to go run a mission, that's going to cost some supply. Now, for cap, remember that cap represents the units we selected basically continuously flying planes to patrol the area. We have planes in the sky pretty consistently. That's different than, we're going to take our planes, we're going to go to a specific target, we're going to do a specific thing, and then we're going to go home. And that's represented in the supply point cost. So 24 points for each side. Keep that in mind. Not a whole lot. When we look at the supply point cost chart, if you look right there in the middle, cap, op, and strategic map. So either or here, per unit, NATO spends 6 supply points. Warsaw Pact spends 9 supply points. Think about that for a second. 6, that's 1/4 of the NATO supply. And for 9, I mean, gosh, that's a lot too, right? I mean, not quite half, obviously. What is it, 3/8? Something like that, pretty close. It's a fair amount, right? It is a fair amount. A quarter, or not quite a quarter. What am I saying, guys? I'm yes, a third, a little over a third of their supply points using cap. And if you look at the strikes, and we're going to be using regular range here, a strike per unit is 2 supply points. Any other mission, meaning escort, air superiority, is 1. So in practice, what does that mean? Well, if you were to fly 1 strike with 1 escort, that is going to be 3 supply points, which, uh, it ain't so bad. But obviously, as you tack on more planes and you run more sorties, uh, you're going to be using up more and more supply. So the investment in cap, which is huge, right? It's in some cases for the Warsaw Pact, it's the equivalent of 3 of those groups I just described. For NATO, it's worth 2 times as many as those groups I just described. Of course, you could always do more escorts or more bombers in a mission, and spend more supply in either case, but that's kind of the situation we need to deal with. So 24 supply points, and if you spend a huge chunk of it just on cap, what is that going to really do for us? Well, it might enable us to have a better chance of stopping the enemy, fighting on our terms. It provides maybe an at scale, or for the duration of the turn, intercept capability. Even if our planes take a lot of damage or get shot down, we at least have something in the air. So already, when you factor in that the Warsaw Pact has fewer sorties per turn, 2 versus NATO's 3, and our cap is more expensive, that's definitely a factor here. Now, I could say now, like doing that math, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do cap. Never mind. I could do that, but I think I'm going to stay committed to it, and we'll see the consequences of my poor decision making here. Because again, this is a learning scenario, so we might as well make some mistakes, even a little more purposefully, so that we can see the consequences and learn how to be better, demonstrate how mistakes or over expenditure of supply can be a huge problem. I suspect the Warsaw Pact player is going to lose this scenario. So there you go. There's the supply expenditure. I'm going to take off 6 supply for NATO off the top of the chart. So taking that off their 24, leaving them with 18 left, and then taking the 9, uh, which, boy, that just really hurts. So they're down to 15. Boy. Okay, well, so it goes. As we get into the first real action stage, there is a difference that's worth explaining here between the way that ground combat treats the action segments and the way that air units treat it. One important thing is during the beginning, the first action segment, the initiative segment, initiative players segment, they have the first sort of opportunity to fly air missions with the units that they assigned to the offensive category, the top boxes here on the air bases. When they do that, the defender can fly interception and use cap. That's great. And then when we get to the first reaction segment, ordinarily for ground units, you can only do stuff with units that are in that reserve mode. But for air units, when you have units, your air units, as the reaction player, and they are in offensive mode, you can use them during this segment. So, kind of a different logical bit there. So, effectively, each air unit has more opportunities in a turn to do something than, say, a ground unit does, right? Because you need the reserve marker. You can only move reserve marker units at certain times. And then in the third action stage, maybe your units in reserve that you left or didn't put in a reserve that are left over can do stuff as the reaction player. But in air, just to reiterate, every action stage, every segment, in fact, you have some possibility of using some of your air. You have lots of opportunities to use your offensive air units in the first action stage, the second action stage, and the third action stage. So a little more flexibility, and it could mean that we end up spending a lot of supply to go on sorties in the action stage one. In the first reaction segment, NATO might use a lot of their air with the thought that, come the second action stage, they may be able to do it some more, so long as they have the supply to spend. So this is where the urgency of wanting to see something happen needs to be balanced against metering out your effort, lest you run out of supply and leave yourself in trouble, to a uncontested enemy attack when they still have supply left over. So again, as we go into this first action stage, the options are going to be, as it run through here, the Warsaw Pact player is going to determine their missions. They're going to run their missions, and we'll run through that.
We'll do our interceptions, and then as we progress to the first reaction segment, and this would be the segment where if NATO had any ground units in reserve, we would get to use them. We could fly our own bombers at that point. That would be our first opportunity. We basically do the same thing in the second action stage, and then in the third action stage, we would have, presuming that we have supply points and we still have units that were not destroyed, NATO would have the first choice to go on offensives, and then the Warsaw Pact player in the second half of the action stage could fly their offensives if there's anything left. So that's sort of the cadence here. Each side's going to have plenty of opportunities to say, "Yep, let's go for a bombing mission." They'll likely be trying to intercept. They'll be trying to do these things, and um, that will be how this goes. So as we approach our first action stage here, I do want to talk really briefly about the extent of our air defense networks. So ordinarily, when we're playing the full game on the full map, there is an extent that the air defense networks reach up to the sort of country borders between NATO, really West Germany, East Germany, that sort of thing. Um, but the power of the air defense network in order to fire at the enemy is still out to their range. So for the NATO, one, two, three, four, five, six. So if we were to try to derive, we'll say in this instance, a hypothetical border, we could use this river. So this is part of why using the flip side of the exercise map comes in handy a little bit. We could maybe think of this as a border and say, well, if you're east of the river, that's Warsaw Pact territory, and that's the extent of the air sector that the overall air defense network protects, and that this installation is um, but one part of, right? But because this scenario is only so big, we're going to represent it this way. So keep that in mind. Like what we're basically going to be having happen here is as soon as a unit of the Warsaw Pact, excuse me, enters within, again, one, two, three, four, five, six, basically through here, this range of the NATO air defense installation, that Warsaw Pact unit will become detected. So you can see I have these undetected markers on both the NATO cap and the Warsaw Pact cap. So, at the beginning of the scenario, they are technically undetected, but they will become detected as soon as they enter into the territory that is in range of the air defense networks. And this extends from the Warsaw Pact installation. Sorry, guys. Five. One, two, three, four, five. So little less range. We still have to deal with that. So the thing that's going to happen here very quickly, because now it's time to think, well, what do we want to do? If this is the initiative player's action stage, their segment, I should say, the Warsaw Pact player has to make a decision now, right? Like now we are going to fly our units. Now, as soon as one of our units comes within range of that anti-air installation, I think no matter what it's doing, we will actually have an air defense system, ground-to-air combat, where they can be firing defensive countermeasures at the units as soon as they're detected. So once they're detected, if they're in range, we would fire. That is an additional layer of defense. So it's not just, here's there's the air defense network, there's cap, and then we still have opportunities to intercept. So there's multiple layers of defense, right? So as the Warsaw Pact player, and I'm thinking, how do I begin to, get victory points essentially by causing steps? I need to keep that in mind. As soon as I enter these couple of hexes here, I will be detected. I will have to get past air defense, and then we'll very likely have to deal with cap, and the distance from the operating hex that the cap unit is in is 4 hexes. That's enough range to protect both air bases and be in this general area. So both caps should be pretty effective. I'm wondering, and so this is a decision point, right? Part of the strategy and how the system works. Do we run a air superiority mission? So we be looking at our offensive units. It would have to be an offensive unit. Ideally, we were picking a unit with good anti-air ratings, and our objective there is to send that plane out on a mission, not escorting, but simply to go engage the cap. So if the cap, responds and wants to engage us, we think that's fine. The objective is to actually eliminate the cap or force it to abort back to an airbase. And technically, we were supposed to have indicated which base the cap flew from. I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm sorry. So if we did want to do that, which would be a good pick for air superiority? We've got a couple different options, really. I'm wondering if this is in fact a good thing to try right now because we have so many bombers and escorts. But let's do it. This might not be optimal play, guys, but I think I want to try this out just so we have a good sense of how the game is actually going to work. So we're going to go ahead and take this SU-27 uh, unit. It does have beyond visual range capability, so we will use him. And I'm just let's see, does this cap have beyond visual range? It does, but the advantage is to the Soviet unit in this case. So we're going to take him. He's going to fly from Zulu. So I'll go ahead and we'll get him flipped over here. Now he is technically running a anti-air mission, and really, I mean, think about this for a second. Uh, I guess he wouldn't be detected yet, but he's going to be flying from here. We have a mission start counter we're going to put up here. So we're saying, hey, we came from up here. The plane is placed on the airbase because it's lifting off from there. And at least at the moment, it is marked with an undetected marker. On the reverse side, it says anti-air mission. So we're notating this is how we're getting started. So he's coming up here. And again, if I think about like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As soon as I start entering into these hexes here, we will have to deal with the detection and then the air defense. So we would essentially be going, the other thing we could be doing is counting away. Are we in range of other detection mechanisms? I don't think there's really a point in bothering to roll that because as soon as we enter these hexes, we're going to be automatically detected. So just doing this simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And do go 1, 2, 3. We are now within that range, and we have to flip this. So this is now revealed to be there's some shell game here where you're going to mark things and you don't really know what unit is there until it's detected, and then you reveal what mission it's on, and then you kind of know what's going on. We're revealed now, 6 hexes away. We are an anti-air mission, and our air defense network 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 detects it automatically because it is fully operational, at least on turn 1, which means it's automatically detected. So hey, we've detected a plane lifting off, and we are going to want to fire at that unit. So we're going to follow the ground to air procedure to see if we can maybe knock this plane down before it even gets in range of our cap. Because right now, technically, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're still not in range of the cap. And when this unit becomes detected like this is when we would be saying, hey, we're going to operate with our cap, and we can begin moving in response to this unit's movement. So, there's this, it's kind of hard to explain right now, but there's going to be some back and forth. But as soon as it's revealed, because of the air defense, we have to do this first. So we're going to fire from here to here, and then we will declare the cap active, and they will meet somewhere around here, very likely. Um, or we let the plane come to us, I guess. Any of those things are possible. So now it's exciting because we're going to have our first real die roll occurring here. So we have the anti-air rating on the installation here is a 5. So what we'd like to do in this system is we'd like to roll as low as possible. We want to roll under our anti-air rating, and again, as low as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and roll one of my dice in my dice box here, and we rolled a 3, which is two less. So I need to find, okay, air naval target, and I'm going to have to, I'm just going to be using a particular marker here. I think this is the right marker, actually. So up here in the game track, there's this air naval combat resolution. So we have our, I'm going to be using this marker. I think this might be the right one, at least for the moment. We rolled 2 less than our number. We rolled a 3, value was a 5. It is on a 2 less spot. And so when we look at what does this lead to, there is pending 1 hit to uh, our air superiority plane as the Warsaw Pact. They maybe are about to score a hit on that. So at the moment, that is a possible 1 hit. Now the next thing we do, I'm going to change the camera again here a little bit, is we look at the actual target unit, and we need to flip it onto its backside for a moment, and we look at the defending unit's ECM value, which is that yellow boxed 5. So if we can roll as low as possible as the defender on the 5, that may allow us to reduce the marker that's on the air naval combat resolution to cause 0 hits. So you can almost look at this as some kind of like defensive thing. Now, right now, we would have to roll pretty low to avoid, but we'll try it. So I'm going to roll a d10 again. This time, the Warsaw Pact player is rolling, and they want it to be less than 5, as low as possible. And we rolled a 4, so that's less than 5 by 1. So what we're going to do is we now get to move this marker 1 to the left, but unfortunately for the Warsaw Pact, the indicator up here is going to be kind of hard to see. Maybe I can get this zoomed in up there just a little bit more. And of course, there's an additional one I could be using that I'm not. I'll have that for the future here. But for now, we went from 2 to a 1. You can see there's still a 1 hit that is going to be applied to our plane. Now, the hit capacity is the very last number here, which is a 3. So we are going to take a step loss. It's not going to destroy this particular unit, but it is going to be taking a step loss, which has some very unfortunate results for this particular mission. Now, because he's taken a hit, he actually has to abort. So the anti-air mission is essentially a failure, and we are going to pick this guy up, and he's going to return to Zulu, and we're going to place it as the 1 sortie remaining for this unit. And I'll flip him back over like so. So he only has 1 sortie left for the turn. The air mission is complete, and we still did not necessarily lose our detected status of cap. Now, if I were to look at the detection ranges for that, it is possible that maybe something could have happened there. I'm trying to double check the detection table. But the important thing is, at least for the moment, like as soon as that Warsaw Pact plane entered the defensive umbrella of the air defense network, it fired and we scored a hit. The pilot tried to use some countermeasures to avoid, but suffered enough damage that the squadron of planes had to return back to base. So right now, one victory point for NATO. Now the Warsaw Pact player needs to continue to think about, well, that didn't work. And gosh, could you imagine if that was an actual strike mission? We might have gotten hit with some air defense already. Do we need to do something else? Or do we send yet another plane on air superiority, hoping that we can avoid the same situation we just encountered? Something to think about. I also need to point out that having flown that air superiority mission, and despite it failing, all things considered, that did cost the Warsaw Pact player one supply point. So we were going to knock that off the Warsaw Pact supply. Things aren't looking so good from this perspective. We're kind of headed right out of the gate with unfortunate circumstances. Now, granted, with the 5 anti-air rating, it could have just have easily have missed, and then we would have had an actual air fight on our hands, or we could have rolled even better on our ECM rating and avoided that hit. So in this case, it was just bad luck for the Warsaw Pact player that they try to enter enemy airspace and got punished for it. Somebody was asleep uh, in the cockpit maybe, and the NATO forces were on the ball. So now we need to think about something else to do here. Now, I don't know that I want to try to run yet another uh, yet another air superiority mission. I think that is not what we want to do. What we probably want to do is just get some strikes out there. Just go and do it. And ideally, we actually would like to strike the air installation marker. If we can cause 2 hits, we will reduce the air defense network's operation from full to limited. That's in the scenario notes. If we can do that, just chance it, that will mean that we'll have greater capability because they will have to roll to detect us, where right now that is not the case. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend, oh boy, this is going to be expensive. We're going to go big time. We're going to hope that we can get through by just having enough numbers to get through. And this is going to cost us, oh boy, going to be expensive, isn't it? 2, 4, 5, 6 supply. Oh goodness gracious! We're going from 14. Oh man, that's a lot of supply, guys. I sure hope they hit. Um, so these guys are going to be flying from Yankee, and again, we're going to label these. So we're saying, hey, mission starting from uh, Yankee, and actually, come to think of it, we're going to go ahead and we're going to send everybody. So that's going to be another 2. No point in holding back too much. Let's just go for it. We're going to gun it, and we'll try to knock out. Actually, you know what? No, we're going to try to go for the airbase. Let's just do as many hits as we can, and just run the guns and hope for the best. We're gonna have 3 bombers as a part of this mission, and we're gonna have. Uh, whoops, I've got these kind of mixed up here a little bit. We've got 3 bombers and 2 escorts coming from Yankee. So again, we're going to need to put the markers here. So we have undetected strike mission marker on these guys, even though there'll be 1 stack, and we will have a anti-air mission on the escort because that's still an anti-air mission. So these guys would be effectively one stack taking off undetected from Yankee. And if they were going to try to hit Alpha, so 1, 2, 5, 6, again, we're going to see 1, 2, and these guys are going to be automatically detected, at least this turn, in the situation that we have. And this is where the NATO player could see what planes are doing what. That's now public knowledge as these guys are moving forward. And we have the different options here to consider. So again, now that we've detected, we can do air defense. And we're going to go ahead and do that. So rolling the 5, and I rolled a 9. So they have failed to fire, and they are detected. And so it's at this point, I believe, we need to say, hey, are we going to intercept with our cap? And I think we're going to say yes. And so there would be cap coming. So we would say, okay, well, you're intercepting. We're going to move. Okay, so I'm trying to get prepared off camera, guys, so that I don't sound so out of it as I try to describe what's going on. In any case, the units, while detected, air defense missed. These guys will now, let's see, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, they go here, and then so as this unit, well, these guys enter this hex, the cap can say that they engage either adjacent because we have beyond visual range. Of course, so does the enemy here. And so as they come into, as we come into range, as we get engaged here, I believe they have an opportunity to detect the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I think at any point this guy becomes detected because we're going to be within the operating range of this anti-air defense. So is the place, I could be wrong about this, folks, so this might be something that, if the designer's watching this, I would appreciate clarification. I would think as these guys are coming in, right, they're entering this hex, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe I should say this hex. Uh, if we wanted to stop them, or maybe actually we would stop them here, and we would be outside the range of the air defense network. And I think these guys would have an opportunity to detect when they got, or when that unit appeared. I would think so, anyway. Given the only Warsaw Pact units that are nearby to detect are air units, we have a max detection range of 2. But again, at this point, this guy's flying in, or he's appearing in their hex. So, we take that into account here. And they have a chance to detect. So this is going to be NATO unit type to be detected as air. It's a Warsaw Pact air unit doing the detection. We need to roll a 4 or less. And they rolled an 8. So the cap is actually undetected. They will become detected after the combat, but this is important. This means as these guys are coming in, the tornado here is undetected as it approaches and is going to basically block them in so many ways. Because they were undetected prior to this combat, we get to fire first and just do what damage we can do. Okay, so while we have so while these guys are going to get to fire first, I'm just going to remove the detection marker. We still can only engage the escorts, unfortunately for us. And so as I get this situated, this unit has a air-to-air of 6. These guys have 5s. Here's the mathematical problem. So the cap by itself won't be enough. If we're lucky enough, we could cause one of these escorts to abort, and then we would intercept from Airbase Alpha and try to knock down the last interceptor and potentially do other things after that. But that's sort of our struggle from that perspective. So we'll try. We'll try to defend. So I'll roll the NATO attack on the escorts. And again, we're using their air-to-air ratings. We didn't bother to use the beyond visual range because they're about equal, and I just figure I want to get up in there and try to knock somebody down. So hopefully rolling as low as possible, but want to roll lower than a 6. We rolled a 1, so that's great. That's 5, and let's see if they can defend with their ECM of 5. And they did reduce this by 1, 2, 3, but that is still one hit, which means that this escort is going to basically start to head home. And now that that surprise is over, he's detected. This guy has a chance to fire, and he'll try it. Now he rolled a 1, so that's 4 or less, and we're going to defend with our ECM rating of 6. That's pretty good. We rolled a 2, so that's going to mean we got it better than 4, so we take this 1, 2, 3, 4. Alas, we get one hit, and that is it. So these guys are going to end up continuing on. Like, these guys are effectively done. I think Cap may need to go home. This guy's going to start to head home, and sure enough, I mean, we're going to say he probably gets back home. I'm not going to try to chase him down at this point because these guys are still continuing their movement. So with that being done, we're going to declare an interception from Alpha. It's going to be undetected anti-air mission to start with, and these guys have a chance to detect. So we'll give it a shot, and that's a failure. So as these guys enter the hex, we now have a undetected strike on these guys. Again, we're having to fight the escort. So again, this is a really good fighter with an anti-air of 7. So we'll roll the die. Unfortunately, we only got a 6, so we got a 1 and roll their ECM. We rolled a 10, so we failed that. So this is going to cause 1 hit, and he's going to be aborting home as it happens. So he's going to be running home. That part of the mission's done. But he is likewise also going to be done. So now technically this guy is, back on Alpha. He's used a sortie to intercept here. Now the question remains, can we do anything else? Well, these units, because these folks are alerted, they are, or these guys were detected, these guys are alerted, and we can actually still defend. And here's the unfortunate thing for the poor the poor guys here. We can alert up to our capacity, and what I might do is I may only alert with, let me see here, I would want to, we could optionally alert 2 of these units, in the base. Now they would be fighting at half their air to air for the alerting. All the units could technically be alerting, but we would lose a sortie. Now, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, let's just do it with all of them. Why not? Why not? And this is perhaps where the pain comes in for the Warsaw Pact, because the multi-role fighters all here that are here can defend the airbase and do so quite convincingly. In fact, now they're going to be rolling at half their strength, but all things considered, I think that is going to work for them. So there's going to be air-to-air combat here, uh, and it's going to be, I guess, considered simultaneous. But what we're going to end up doing, we'll probably double up. So, uh, say him and him there. Actually, these two on this bomber, these two on that bomber, and this guy on that bomber. So having, we round up, so there's going to be 2 shots from these guys, 3 and 4 respectively, so we'll give it a shot. Miss and a hit. So these guys have 2 on this guy. He has an ECM of 5, so he could do it. And he fails. So this guy's going to take a... We can probably get rid of the strike marker because I know what's going on. This guy's going to take a step, and he's going to end up aborting. These 2 here, so a 3 and a 3. 1 was a hit. Try to get out of that. And he fails. So he's going to take a hit, and he's going to be aborting. So, okay, there's only 1 left. We need to roll a 3 or less and hit this guy. Fingers crossed. We got 1 less. We rolled a 2. So does the Warsaw Pact player avoid it? And he does get through. Wow, okay. All right, so these guys are going to be done. So they're going to all end up on the 2 sortie block here. These guys are all going to have retreated back home to Yankee, and we're going to find that they're going to have, let's see, yeah, boy, all 1 sortie left. This defense and alert didn't cost any supply points. And so now we have, you think we're going to strike yet, right? No. There's ground to air because of our airbase. And so we have an anti-air of 3. We're going to give it a shot against this guy. 1 more shot. And we miss. So now we're going to do the actual strike. It took all of that, right? We flew, we got past the air defense, we got past cap, we got past multiple interceptors, as well as alerted planes, and 1 set of Su-24s are getting through to strike the airbase. Now, because all these guys were alerted, they're not actually, and I think I needed to put one of these guys on the interception side, so that's my bad. I might have got those mixed up, but oh well. Because all these guys were alerted, I don't believe they're going to take points off for if the airbase is struck. So if we had caught them, if they weren't alerted, it's possible we could have taken steps off, but that was not the case. All right, with the strike able to be completed, we're going to roll. We want a 5 or less. And we rolled a 10. Ay, 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 ay. Okay, well, despite all attempts, we have failed to actually do the damage that we needed to do. and this guy's going to try to head home. Now the question would be, would we try to intercept from maybe some planes down here in Bravo? Uh, but I think we're going to let him get away, and that's it for that mission. Wow, that took a while, didn't it, guys? And I may have screwed something up somewhere along the way. I think this is probably the most complicated part of this game, is the procedures. I think there needs to be maybe there's a flow chart. Maybe that already exists that kind of walks you through every permutation of how to do this. I mean, it's kind of here, but I don't know that it's as clear. It's not as detailed as it probably needs to be. Where ultimately it's like, okay, they launch, is there cap, do the cap, is there ADF, do the air defense fire, then cap, then interceptors, they get into the hex, then you can maybe alert some planes, and so on and so forth. But boy, that was a lot. And now I'm looking at the Warsaw Pact supply, and I'm thinking, okay, well, they only have 6 supply points left, so what else can we do? What else can we do? Well, what we can try to do is, now that these guys are all, they've been alerted, they've lost a sortie. What else can we do to inflict the hits that we want to have and continue to do our damage? We unfortunately have taken some hits. We've already flown some of our units. We don't have a great number of things that we can do other than maybe fly another mission. I think we have the range to do it, um, using our planes from base Zulu, and try to go like this. One, two, five. Circle out around, and then see if that is actually better. We could do that. I think I might try. A couple of quick fixes just to mention. When we did fly interception with NATO, we did have to spend a supply point because that is technically an air mission. So I've deducted the supply point. The other thing is, in those fights against the alerted NATO units, um, I guess technically the bombers could be firing back with their anti-air ratings, given simultaneous combat. And the reality was, those striking bombers, I went ahead and rolled for them, and they missed. Well, one would have hit, but then the uh, NATO unit used ECM and avoided the hit. So, all things considered, NATO came out happy with that. And I guess as we're counting step losses, I mean, right now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step losses to Warsaw Pact, and that's them on the offensive, right? So again, we've tried to penetrate the air defense of NATO. That failed. We took some hits. We tried a strike mission. We dealt with cap. We dealt with interceptors, and then we dealt with the final line of defense, the alerted units at the air base, along with the natural defense of the anti-air of the or the air base rather. And after all that, the Warsaw Pact didn't even hit. They didn't even hit with that whole set of missions. So, gosh, we've expended most of our supply. We have enough supply to maybe try one more set of things. And here's the funny part, guys. We're still in the first action stage of turn one. We've not done the second action stage. We've done really nothing else. And the NATO player has simply waited. And if they get their opportunity in the reaction phase, they can kind of do what they want. They have 17 supply at the moment. That's enough that they could launch their own strikes. But before long, and if the Warsaw Pact player isn't careful, they're going to run out of supply, even to use on defense and intercepting. So, um, at this point, I'm kind of thinking, well, we need to try to use our supply as the Warsaw Pact to try to do some damage. We got to cause some hits somewhere. If we don't, because we've done what, one hit to the cap of NATO, um, if we don't score any more hits, well, we're going to lose by default, because At this point, the NATO player could say, "I'm not launching any strikes. I'm already winning. I've dealt five hits to you. I don't need to run any strikes. You want to come back into my, multi-layer defense? You go right ahead, Warsaw Pact." So I think the Warsaw Pact has to double down. We need to try again and make a difference. And if we do enough damage, we might force the NATO forces to go on the attack, and we would get to use our cap and air defense. So I'm thinking we got to keep trying to attack here. With the help of the very kindly responses from the game designer and the Red Strike community on Facebook, I'm able to clarify a few things I wanted to get straight before I did this next part. So a little bit of a time skip for me in recording this video. So we've got these guys, the Interceptor, the units that alerted, that uses up their sortie for the turn for NATO. So while the cap is still functional, even having taken a hit, I believe, um, these guys are done, which means if we were to send another mission to that hex, to that airbase, while it would still get some air defense protection and the immediate anti-air of the air base, the planes cannot be alerted again, which means that whole wasp nest of F-16s and FA-18s are not going to be able to respond to another combat. So that was sort of the cost. If I alerted every single plane, um, they would use up their sortie for this first action stage. Remember, we're still in the first action stage of turn one. Had I held a couple back, they were maybe susceptible to taking hits once the strike against the airbase occurred. But I wanted to get as much out there to defend as possible, and that did pay off. But it's leaving us somewhat susceptible. So at this point, I think, and I discussed this in the previous clip you just heard me talking, we're going to send another package at Airbase Alpha as the Warsaw Pact. We are going to Hail Mary this and try to do some more damage. And if we're fortunate enough, we can double our hits because, let's just say we do really well and we score, I don't know, 2 hits on the airbase. That will functionally mean we're inflicting 4 hits, and that could tie it up in terms of hits inflicted. Now, we could still lose some hits on our own planes, but we're kind of running up against the clock here, so to speak, a little bit. Now, the funny thing is, maybe if I were to restart this whole scenario, and I'm not going to do that, I might have changed the order of operations here. If only because I realize that our TU 95 unit has cruise missiles that have a range of 14. So this just, wonderful plane. You notice it doesn't have the blue circle for anti-air. It has a cruise missile range, a strike package with AS. Let's see if I can get that to focus. AS-6 cruise missile. So why is that important? Well, what I could have done, maybe if I was a bit smarter, or at least had been looking at my counters a little more closely, is maybe the more appropriate strategy might have been to hold back on turn one, and then rather invade or sortie into enemy air, we can simply say, we could have said that this bomber coming out of Zulu fires its cruise missile package at the air defense network, right? Now, if I look on our missile tables, AS-6, Kingfish, air, ground, and if we were targeting an air base, that is a 44. So we would roll a D100 effectively, wanting to roll a 44% chance of inflicting a hit. Now, we could miss. That could have happened. But if we had hit, and then if we waited until the second stage of turn one and did it again, that would have brought the air defense to limited, and then it's not guaranteed detection. This guy's outside the detection range, by the way, so he could just fire, and there's really nothing to stop those cruise missiles. I can't, unless we were determining that there's some Patriot defense systems in place, we could fire the cruise missiles, possibly across two action stages, cause enough damage to disable, or I should say, damage the air defense network, put it into limited operating capability, and then either in the later part of turn one, or even if we needed to wait until turn two, then launch all of our Warsaw Pact strike missions and deal damage with the benefit of not having as easy a chance of being detected. But I didn't do that because I didn't pay close enough attention to my assets and I missed out on that opportunity. But that would, if I were to do this over again, that certainly seems like a very good option. The NATO units don't have a similar capability for long range cruise missiles in this scenario. So that's an advantage that the Warsaw Pact actually has in this scenario that we did not use effectively. So if you're trying this out at home and you want to start over, look at that. Look at this unit's capability, the range. 44% chance is pretty good. I mean, that's almost half. So you've got a couple of opportunities to give it a shot. Use up the sorties every turn on trying to reduce the air defense network, and that opens it up a little bit more, provides a little more safety to then send in air superiority, knock out the cap, whoops, and then launch your strike missions as appropriate, and focusing effort to exhaust a given air base, like we're kind of doing now. So coulda, woulda, shoulda, didn't. Now I think I am best at this point, due to my limited number of supply points. My very best option at this point is to simply send that big bombing unit along with the rest of the bombers, so that we're using uh, the 5 bombardment in the hex itself, um, to do a larger number of hits. Because with the cruise missile, just to explain why we would even do that, if you hit with a cruise missile, rolling 44 underneath for that particular cruise missile type, you can at most do one step, one hit if you succeed. So it's just one hit. We can turn that into two hitting an airbase, but okay. If you're doing your bombardment factor, so we roll underneath a 5, and if we roll low enough, we could actually do more than one hit. We could do, at least for that kind of plane, we could do 2 hits, and then 2 hits becomes 4 hits. And that's why this late in the scenario, again, given it's still turn one and the first action stage, it's not that late, but we've already used a lot of units. At this point, that's our best option to inflict the maximum number of hits. We need to get the plane closer to use all of its, bombs, weapons, what have you, to do as much damage as possible. Okay, so as it is, we're gonna start a new mission. We're gonna elect to do a new mission, and we're gonna send, I guess, the remnants of what we got here. I have to make some decisions on bombing capability versus escort, but we'll go ahead and get these guys situated here, and this is going to cost us 5 supply. We're only going to have 1 supply left, which really limits our ability to intercept and to do much else. So I see this being a NATO victory, kind of no matter which way we plug it. We're going to send these guys as the strike mission. I can put my mission start up here. So strike mission. This guy. Oh, oops. No, that's not right. My goodness, guys. Strike mission. And this is our escort. So where's my air? So undetected for the moment will be our mission, and I'm going to do something a little special here, guys. I'm gonna try to go this way, because while all the planes at Airbase Alpha are effectively done, they can't move this action stage. NATO still has a number of units over here in Airbase Bravo. So if I go this way, and we have enough range on each plane, I mean, by quite a lot. Range is not an issue here. We go around. By the time we get detected here, we get past air defense. we maybe have to deal with cap, or we start an interception here. Well, we can deal with cap. By the time they send a different interceptor here, because we get to move first, it's going 1, 2, and an interceptor goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4. We get here before they do. Now, granted, these guys do have beyond visual range, and they may need to use it, but this is going to be better than if we were trying to go this way, straight beeline, go 1, 2, 3, 4. We get detected here, and the interceptors can move basically in response to us, and they can get to us before we get to our target. So this is actually, when you talk about the interactivity of the air system here, you can kind of do these weird, tricky things. Like our flight path is going to make it so we can get a more direct route before we know the only responders, have more distance to intercept us. So, you really need to think about this stuff. I think that's interesting. Like, this is very, the complexity, the nuance is interesting to play with here of our, what's our equipment? What can we do? Is it better to straight shot or circle around right now? We want to circle around. So we're going to go flying over, double check the air defense. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We are going to run across the north part of the map here. So doot and then doot. Now, at this point, because the air defense is still peachy keen and full strength, we are going to be detected no matter what. So we're going to go ahead and flip our markers. And I mean, we know what's going on here, guys, right? We know. Setting these guys back up. And now we have the air defense. So range of 6, anti-air of 5. We're going to try it. We're going to roll it. Does NATO air defense hit these guys? I rolled a 3, so that puts us at the 2, but we can still roll ECM. Now we use the best ECM in the stack, which I suspect is going to be 5. Yeah, it's 5. So need to roll, need to roll high here, or low. We will need to roll really low. And I failed. Oh, no. Someone's going to take a hit. Now, I need to see who gets to pick the hit here. Okay, we as the owner of the units get to pick the hit. So this is going to cause somebody to abort. I need to think about this. I might actually let one of our units, one of our bombers, take the hit. Because what we don't want to have happen is get so completely mauled that we can't make something happen that I need to make happen, right? That's basically the idea here. And if we're gonna lose somebody, because again, without an escort, oh man, this is a tough decision. I think we got to go for broke here, guys. I'm gonna let the this is NATO's gonna win this scenario, guys. That's what's gonna happen. We're gonna take the hit to our escort, I think. Yeah, I think we are. So we're gonna send him home. And really, at this point, there's no. I'm just gonna send him back. I'm not gonna count all the way back. He's gonna get home fine at this point. But these guys can continue on. So that was a bummer, right? Now we can go another one. Go 1, 2, 3, 4. We go here. Now I could have launched a different interceptor. The problem is, I mean, and so as soon as we got detected here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe it would be better rather than use our cap to intercept. We just send our interceptor straight up. So maybe we do that. I mean, this is going to be the funny things. We go here. He's the interceptor. I'm not going to need to. Well, I should probably mark it. I guess it's undetected interceptor. So we move 2, 1, 2. These guys move 1, 2, 3, 4, and we go, we'll say 5, 6. Now, within this range, they could be detected. So the question will be, do they detect him? And we'll roll. And I think they actually succeeded in detection. Double checking. This is a air units detecting. We did. So they are detected when they enter here, which is too bad. Now, these guys don't have any beyond visual range weapons, but they do. So no matter what, they're going to try to fire with this. So this is a sky flash. Sky flash. And if I look at, let's see, sky flash range of 1. I need to roll a 5 or less, I think, right? Yes, and we're 1 hex away, which is better. So if we're looking at our thing here, we got Sky Flash. We're 1 operational hex away. That is a 5. So we're going to try to roll less than a 5 here. And we fail miserably. So we can mark this guy with his standoff used for what it matters. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we get to move again. And we're going to come in. These units cannot alert, but we will have the anti-air roll. So we're going to try for that. And the anti-air misses. And basically, they're going to get to launch their strike, which is going to be the thing we really needed to do. So, going to be rolling. Let's see, first shot, 5 or less. Ha, 10, miss. My goodness. Second shot, that is a hit for 2 hits, basically. And so that's kind of exactly what we needed. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark this on the air base here. So Alpha has taken 2 hits, and now there has to be 2 hits on the units, 1 for each hit. I don't know that it really matters. We do have to distribute it. Don't know what's the best option here. So maybe rather have it on. Boy, none of these are great options. We'll do just this. I'm not sure how much it's really going to matter. So those guys each take a hit. Let's put them at the bottom. So we just did 4 hits total because we successfully did that bombing mission now. And I'm going to just take this off because we know that they're done. They completed their mission, right? So they went, completed their mission, and now wanting to get away, I think. Now let me double check this here. So the key thing is now whether or not this guy can move, no matter which way they would go. They did 1, and they finished their mission. They can move 1 hex, let's say this way or that way. Wouldn't really matter. In theory, I believe this is the case. So this could be where I'm wrong, guys. I believe this to be true. Just because we've used our standoff weapons doesn't mean our interception is done. So we would come into the hex with these guys and have air-to-air combat, and so with that in mind, we would do it up, and we're going to have this guy shoot at the big plane there, the bigger planes, the bombers, big bombers, and we just hit for one, or potentially, I guess, hit for one, and we're going to use the other plane's ECM for this to see if we can knock it down, and we do, so that fails. These guys can fire back, and they miss. So this guy is done. His mission is over, so he's going to have to go back. These guys can continue to move, but we say we're going to send in, the only other unit that we have that we can do any interception with is with our cap, and we would conduct that. This interception mission is complete. He's going home, but while he's going home, I believe we can we can intercept here and come right in. And so same story here. Now we do have a hit on our cap. He didn't have to abort when he took that hit because he's capped. That's special, but we are reduced in our capability. So we'll try same thing. We managed to score a good shot, and we'll try to get out of it. They fail, and so this plane is going to take 2 hits. Does not destroy it, but heavily damaged. These guys can fire back. They miss. And that's it for that interception. And really, we don't have any other interception that can take place. This guy's going to be busy, flying home. He'll eventually do that. These guys, likewise, taking the long route back home, and we'll end up here if I did all of that correctly. So the things I'm uncertain of is, exactly when or how we can get that launch, and I do believe after firing standoff weapons, an interceptor can still intercept, I believe. So those are going to be questions I'm going to want to get validated. Could be I'm wrong, in which case this video is a little less useful. Now, at this point, if we were to count up all the hits across the board, this guy, he is done. Remove that marker. He's going to been our used interceptor here. All of our hits, we have 2 on the airbase up here. We have 2 hits on the units up here. We have the hit here. Total of 5 hits inflicted on NATO. Unfortunately for Warsaw Pact at this point, they have 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see, I've got a big stack of stuff here. 1, so 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 step losses total, it looks like. Here's the grand question, folks. Does NATO even care about running their own strikes? Because if we're adjudicating victory by the most hit on enemy units, NATO hasn't had to do much. I do need to take off a supply. We have a good amount of supply left as NATO. We could execute our own strikes, but right now, I'm not sure we need to. We have sufficiently beat up the Warsaw Pact players' air units. We've inflicted more damage than we've received, though only by so much. Right now, they do have their own interceptors. They have their own air defense. They have their own cap. We might only be bringing more danger on ourselves. So as we wrap up the first action stage with the Warsaw Pact having basically one supply point left, that's not enough to run really any additional missions of value. I think, when it comes to the NATO player, they're going to pass the rest of the scenario. The rest of turn 1 going into turn 2. Can the Warsaw Pact do anything? They can fly basically one air superiority mission, and even if they won that, at most they can do 1 step loss to the cap, and that's not going to make up the differential. So we're going to call this a NATO victory for red flag. And this video is probably getting pretty long, and I should aim to wrap it up here. But let me give a few post mortem thoughts on the situation. Okay, so what to think about this whole red flag scenario? Well, it certainly brings the complexity level of what we've dealt with in the red strike system way up because there's so many interactive steps that we need to follow, right? Is something detected? Okay, is it detected by air defense? Then we need to fire air defense. If there were a lot of ground units, it's possible they might have been firing air defense at uh, units flying overhead as well. That didn't matter here. Um, so kind of like every hex, there's this little decision tree of do we detect it? Yes or no. How do we detect it? If it's with air defense, we can fire air defense. Then does cap have range to intercept? Then do we need to fly interception? And if we are flying interception, basically the mission continues and the attacking strike force gets to keep moving a couple hexes at a time to get to their target. So depending on when you intercept, you may not be able to catch the enemy in time, but you can catch them on their way home. And even when units get aborted, there's the potential. We didn't really see it here because there wasn't a lot of potential for it. But on their way home, units actually can be damaged by other types of fire potentially um, in those circumstances. We didn't have it here, but it is possible, even for uh, you know um, even for our units that were going home as interceptors. But if there's no danger and there's no way to hit them, you can just place them back at base, which I generally did. But technically, there's a lot of tracking of each hex that air unit is flying through, where and how different long range weaponry can interact with those units. It's definitely a step above, I think, a lot of other systems that may abstract some of these things or do it in a more hand wavy method. So I think there's going to be a lot of folks that really like this diligence of just every little step matters and what do you throw in. I think it can be maybe a little much for some folks that don't want to engage with this level of complexity, but I do think it's interesting. It means that the air part of this game is not just a layered on; it's really its own game. And I'm seeing more and more that in the title of Red Strike, Air, Land, and Naval Combat in Central Europe, 1989. That it's really like three games, right? And that overlap. So an air game that you could maybe play, just like this scenario by itself, is kind of an interesting little scenario to play. It's its own game in many respects. The naval stuff is a game, the ground stuff is a game, and altogether it's a big game. So I guess I'm pleased with the way it interacts, though I feel with the different parts of the rules and the way the rules are structured, you're kind of having to bounce between sections and pages, making sure that you're doing things in the right order. I'm going to have to do some snooping and see if someone's created like a really nuanced flow chart to manage this. Maybe it's in the box and I'm not seeing it. Haven't looked for it. But there is a lot to consider. You can follow the rules, you can execute it, you can make it work. Obviously, I didn't play well as the Warsaw Pact, especially because I didn't do that whole strategy I mentioned where we use the cruise missiles to damage this installation, and that would help us a great deal in being able to penetrate NATO territory without immediately being detected and being able to operate. And the detected versus undetected, undetected is such an advantage, or being able to detect the enemy is so important. And again, all these weird little interrupts where, oh, well, as soon as you enter this hex, I could try to detect you. Let me try that. There's a lot of stop and start in the mechanics. So again, getting into that like nuance, there's complexity, there's a lot of interaction, um, and it is intensive to work through all of these processes. Um, but had I been able to knock down that air defense a little bit with the cruise missiles, we would have had a lot more flexibility in what we did as the Warsaw Pact. And we saw right away our air superiority mission got deflected immediately. Now the dice get a vote, and the dice really didn't go the Warsaw Pact's way, I would say. I'd say in terms of luck, NATO did better. Um, But I could see a better way to untangle this puzzle. Now, you can play variations of this scenario where you remove the air defense and then you're just, doing it straight up. Um, I think that is an interesting way to play because now both sides are desperately trying to detect and they don't have a guarantee. Where here, those air defense, the air defense systems provide just that ease of knowing that you're going to detect whatever comes your way. Now, if you were to look at this in a more combined arms scenario, I might be looking at it and saying, well, if I really wanted to make headway here, if I'm going to decompose the problem, I would start with using some long range missile units like we saw in Able Archer, and I'd be using those if we could to try to reduce these installations and then clear the capability or use any other cruise missile options that I have, with surface striking, like the units that we were trying to use, would give us that benefit, ground target cruise missiles. Reduce that, then if there's cap, air superiority, and once we've kind of, like deconstructing a wall, we take down the air defense with cruise missiles, we take down cap with air superiority, and then we pick our targets, and used phased approaches to ideally exhaust an airbase, in which case we have a better chance of doing double hits, which is all the better, right? So that's kind of, even just playing this scenario helps to illustrate and educate you on how to try to deconstruct an air defense and how to damage your enemy's air bases, which, if you're looking for air superiority over the strategic level, this is the way to do it, right? You want to exhaust their air capability, you want to damage their air bases and their air units when they're unable to fly in defense, and maybe that's going to, help you over the long haul, being able to control the skies and do the casts that you need to do to make progress with your ground unit. So all that said, I think I'm going to call the video here, guys. So we didn't really play through even turn two. We don't need to. But I think I've played enough and I've tried to illustrate enough of the way this works that you should get a feel for it. I admit I could have made some mistakes here. I could be slightly misunderstanding the rules. I would ask anybody who's watching this video who's an expert to point out my flaws here and let me know where I went wrong. And maybe I can do a revision video or a part two where we try to do it right, in another try, perhaps. But this should give you a sense of how this stuff works. Now, this is going to make for some exciting bits in the next scenario, the next training exercise, the next video will incorporate, the aspects of the system we've experienced up to this point. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video when we put all we've learned together in a more, maybe it's the midterm exam we've got for Red Strike in the next one. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Sorry if it was a little bit long and a little complicated. Next one should be pretty fun, I expect. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. See ya in the next one. Take care. Keep gaming.